August 7, 1945. Kisarazu Naval Air Base, Chiba Prefecture, Japan. Lieutenant Commander Susumu Takaoka sits in the cramped cockpit of the strangest aircraft he has ever flown. The heat is oppressive, even for August. Sweat runs down his neck as he studies the instrument panel before him. Outside, ground crew members scramble across the hot concrete runway, making final checks. The aircraft itself looks wrong to his pilot's eye. No propeller, no spinning blades slicing the air. Just two bulbous pods slung beneath wings that seem too thin, too delicate. Inside those pods, something revolutionary waits. The Nakajima Kika sits silent as a held breath, Japan's first jet-powered aircraft. Through the cockpit glass, Takaoka sees clear blue sky scattered with brilliant white clouds, a southward sea. Breeze carries the smell of salt water and aviation fuel. 1,800 meters of runway stretch ahead. Behind him, engineers and Navy officials watch with desperate hope. Every man present knows what hangs in the balance. 6 days ago, American B-29s obliterated entire city blocks in seconds. Yesterday, something even worse happened to Hiroshima. Though nobody yet understands exactly what, Japan is losing. Badly. But this aircraft might change everything. Takaoka has been flying since his 20s. Now 33 years old, born in Tadotsu, he has tested dozens of aircraft types. But nothing prepared him for this moment. The Kika carries no weapons today, only 16 minutes of fuel made partly from pine root oil. Japan's petroleum reserves vanished months ago. The improvised fuel smells different, burns different. Will it work? The engineers swear it will. Takaoka has rehearsed ground taxiing all morning. The jet engines respond slowly to throttle changes. Drop below 6,000 RPM and they might seize completely. The brakes are inadequate for the aircraft's weight. One mistake during landing could be fatal. These problems should have been solved before the first flight, but there is no time. There has not been time for anything, not since September 1944 when the Navy ordered Nakajima to build this aircraft. He thinks about the American test pilot report he read this morning. The United States flew their first jet, the Bell P-59 Era Comet, 3 years ago. 3 years. They had special long runways built just for testing jets. Takaoka has 1,800 meters and whatever luck the gods provide. The difference between the two nations fills him with a heavy sense of responsibility. He takes a deep breath, gives the signal with his left arm. The moment arrives. What Takaoka does not know, cannot know, is that he is about to fly the only Japanese jet that will ever take off under its own power during World War II. What he does not know is that 4 days from now in this same aircraft, everything will go catastrophically wrong. What he does not know is that the aircraft beneath him represents both Japan's most desperate gamble and its most remarkable achievement. By the time he lands today, the entire future of Japanese aviation will have changed. But that future will be measured in days, not years. The throttles move forward in his hands. To understand the Kika, you must understand desperation. By the summer of 1944, Japan faced strategic catastrophe. American B-29 superfortresses bombed the home islands with impunity. Cruising at altitudes exceeding 30,000 feet, Japanese fighters struggled to reach them. Even when interceptors made it to altitude, they arrived with diminished engine power, unable to catch the American giants that cruised at nearly 350 miles per hour. The numbers told a devastating story. Between November 1944 and August 1945, B-29s flew more than 30,000 sorties against Japan. Japanese fighters shot down fewer than 500 of them. The exchange ratio was catastrophic. For every B-29 destroyed, Japan lost dozens of experienced pilots and irreplaceable aircraft. The bombing campaign was grinding Japan's industrial capacity into rubble. Something radical was needed. Something that could climb faster, fly higher, intercept bombers before they reached their targets. The answer came from Germany. In 1942, a Japanese military attaché in Berlin witnessed flight trials of the Messerschmitt Me 262, the world's first operational jet fighter. His reports electrified Tokyo. The Me-262 flew nearly 550 miles per hour, outpacing every Allied fighter by more than 100 miles per hour. It climbed to 30,000 feet in minutes, not the agonizing half-hour Japanese interceptors required. Most importantly, jet engines delivered full power at altitude. No propeller aircraft could match that. In July 1944, Luftwaffe Chief Hermann Göring authorized a technology transfer. Japan would receive complete blueprints for the Me-262, along with technical specifications for 2 German jet engines, the Junkers UMO-04 and the BMW-003. A Japanese technical mission in Germany carefully photographed engines, collected engineering drawings, and prepared tooling specifications. Everything was loaded aboard submarines for the dangerous voyage to Japan. The submarines never made it. Allied naval forces controlled the shipping lanes. Attack submarines and patrol aircraft hunted anything flying a Japanese flag. One submarine carrying a complete set of BMW-003 engine plans vanished at sea. Crew and cargo lost forever. But one technical mission engineer survived, sailing aboard a different submarine. He carried something invaluable in his luggage: personal notes and several photographs of the BMW engine. It was not much, but Japanese engineers would make it enough. Captain Tokiyasu Tanegashima led the engine development program at the Naval Air Technical Arsenal at Kugisho. A hot-blooded pioneer who had struggled for years to develop jet technology, Tanegashima took those fragmentary notes and photographs and began reverse engineering an entirely new engine. Working from incomplete information, his team created the NE-20 turbojet. It used an 8-stage axial compressor, drawing design principles from the BMW-003, but adapting them to Japanese manufacturing capabilities and available materials. The challenge seemed impossible. Japan lacked the high-strength alloy metals required for turbine blades. Those blades spin at tremendous speeds and temperatures exceeding 800 degrees Celsius. Without proper alloys, they would fail quickly. Tanegashima's engineers knew their turbine blades could last perhaps a few hours before degradation, but a few hours was enough for testing. It was also enough for one-way suicide missions, though nobody said that part out loud yet. Meanwhile, in September 1944, the Japanese Navy directed the Nakajima firm to design an aircraft around the NE-20 engine. The requirements seemed modest compared to the Me-262. Top speed of 432 miles per hour, range of 127 miles with one 102-pound bomb, or 173 miles with a 551-pound bomb. Maximum takeoff run of 1,150 feet using rocket-assisted takeoff. Landing speed of 92 miles per hour. These specifications reflected a brutal reality. The Kika was being designed as an attack bomber, possibly for special attack missions. Suicide missions, kamikaze engineers Kazuo Ono and Kenichi Matsumura led the Nakajima design team. They had less than a year to design, build, and test an entirely new type of aircraft using an engine that barely existed. The pressure was extraordinary. Before we continue, I would love to know what you think about these desperate last-ditch weapons programs. Drop a comment below and let me know if you have heard this story before. If you are enjoying this level of historical detail, please subscribe to the channel. These deep dives take serious research, and knowing you are out there makes it all worthwhile. Ono and Matsumura created something that superficially resembled the Me-262, but differed in crucial ways. The Kika was dramatically smaller, with just 4/5 the wingspan of the German jet. Where the Me-262 featured swept wings, the Kika used straight wings. The German aircraft had a distinctive triangular fuselage cross-section. The Kika did not. Most tellingly, the Kika was designed with folding wing panels. Why? So ground crews could hide it in caves and tunnels. Japan no longer controlled its own airspace. Aircraft that could not be hidden would be destroyed on the ground. Allied pilots reported being stunned when Me-262s attacked, diving away at speeds nothing could match. The Me-262's maximum speed exceeded 540 miles per hour at altitude, nearly 110 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. Once a Me-262 pilot decided to disengage, pursuing him was futile. Allied fighters would break apart from structural stress before catching up. That speed advantage changed combat completely. The Kika could not match that performance. Japanese engineers predicted a maximum speed of around 432 miles per hour, substantially slower. Why? The NE-20 engines produced only 1,047 pounds of thrust each. Me-262's Jumo 004 engines delivered 1,184 pounds each, nearly double. That massive difference in power fundamentally limited what the Kika could accomplish. But the Kika had advantages the Mi-262 lacked. It was lighter, much lighter, empty weight of just 5,070 pounds compared to the Mi-262's 8,820 pounds. This meant the Kika needed less runway, climbed more quickly initially, and consumed less fuel. For a nation whose fuel reserves had evaporated, efficiency mattered more than raw speed. The engineering challenges were immense. Japan's manufacturing infrastructure was crumbling under constant bombing. Skilled workers had been drafted into combat units. Factories operated in dispersed locations to avoid destruction. The specifications explicitly required that the Kika be buildable largely by unskilled labor. Every design choice reflected wartime limitations. The NE-20 engines hung in pods beneath the wings rather than being integrated into the fuselage. This made installation and maintenance vastly simpler. Mechanics could swap engines without major disassembly. For an aircraft expected to fly suicide missions, ease of maintenance seemed almost darkly ironic. But the engineers planned for training versions, reconnaissance variants, even a fighter model to intercept B-29s. Lieutenant Commander Takaoka had watched the Kika develop from blueprints to wooden mock-up to completed aircraft. He attended every examination, every milestone review. When the first prototype was ready for taxi tests in July 1945, he was there, feeling the unfamiliar vibration of jet engines. The sensation was completely different from propeller aircraft. No rhythmic throb, just a high-pitched whine and subtle vibrations that felt wrong to every instinct trained on conventional aircraft. Test engineers discovered serious problems during ground trials. The NE-20 engines suffered significant throttle lag. Moving the throttle forward did not produce immediate thrust increases. Several seconds passed before the engines responded. This made precise speed control difficult, especially dangerous during landing approaches. The engines would seize if RPM dropped below 6,000. This meant pilots could never reduce to idle power, a fundamental technique in normal flight operations. The brakes, borrowed from the Mitsubishi A6M0 fighter, proved completely inadequate for the Kika's greater weight. And the aircraft's light wing loading meant ground handling required delicate touch. Any one of these issues should have delayed the first flight for months. But by August 1945, months did not exist. Soviet forces had entered the war against Japan. Okinawa had fallen. American bombers could reach any target in Japan. The Kika had to fly, problems or not. On the afternoon of August 7, 1945, Takaoka taxied to the north end of Kisarazu's runway. Light fuel load, flaps set to 20 degrees. He checked for obstacles ahead and behind, then gave the departure signal. The jet engine spooled up slowly. The Kika accelerated down the runway, smooth and steady. At the midpoint, airspeed reached rotation speed. Takaoka pulled back gently. The nose lifted. The aircraft climbed away from the concrete, trailing heat shimmer from the jet exhausts. The sensation was eerie. Takaoka later described feeling lonely without a propeller, instinctively checking engine instruments to confirm the engines were actually running. The vibration was so different, so minimal, that it felt like flying a glider, but the altimeter wound up steadily. The Kika climbed better than predicted, reaching 600 meters quickly. Turning over Kisarazu Bay to keep the airfield in sight, Takaoka leveled off. Engine speed 11,000 RPM, airspeed 170 knots, about 315 kilometers per hour. He began stability tests with landing gear extended. Directional stability seemed strong, perhaps too strong. The elevator felt slightly oversensitive. But the rudder and ailerons worked well despite being somewhat heavy. Everything worked. The Kika flew. Takaoka made one more turn, lined up for landing. Flaps to 40 degrees. Throttle reduced carefully to 7,000 RPM. Terrified of causing a flameout, he approached faster than takeoff speed, trailing thin white smoke. The touchdown was smooth. Directional control excellent. Moderate braking brought the aircraft to rest about 2/3 down the runway. Total flight time, just under 12 minutes. Japan had joined the jet age. That night, everyone involved celebrated with genuine joy. Captain Tanegashima, the engine designer, had tears in his eyes when Takaoka reported the flight. Years of struggle against impossible odds had produced success. The Kika worked. Now development could accelerate. More test flights. Performance envelope expansion. Combat trials. Deployment to frontline units. The 724th Naval Air Group had already formed on July 1st, designated as Japan's first jet unit. They began training at Misawa Air Base on August 1st using conventional aircraft while waiting for Kika deliveries. Combat operations were scheduled to begin in November. Plans called for mass production across multiple factories. The Nakajima facility at Koizumi had 24 more Kika airframes under construction, in various stages of completion. The Kyushu aircraft plant prepared assembly lines. Production was ramping toward hundreds of aircraft, but history had other plans. On August 11th, the second test flight was scheduled, this time with full fuel load in front of numerous Navy and Army officials. Rocket-assisted takeoff bottles would demonstrate short-field capability. Takaoka felt uneasy about the radar installation. The rocket seemed positioned incorrectly relative to the aircraft's center of gravity. To compensate, engineers reduced thrust from 800 kilograms force per rocket to just 400. Takaoka climbed into the cockpit for the last time. Flaps set, pre-flight checks complete. He gave the departure signal, advanced the throttles, counted to 4, then triggered the ratio bottles. The Kika lunged forward violently. The nose pitched up sharply, grinding the tail against concrete. Takaoka could not see ahead. The elevator did not respond. The aircraft accelerated in the same nose-high attitude for 8 long seconds until the rockets burned out. Suddenly the nose dropped hard. The entire aircraft decelerated, or seemed to. Takaoka was confused. Instruments looked normal. No engine vibration. Airspeed over 80 knots, but the sensation of deceleration persisted. He made the decision to abort. Engines off, maximum braking. But the brakes barely worked. With only 1/3 of the runway remaining, Takaoka tried a ground loop. The aircraft barely turned. He aimed for open ground. The Kika passed the runway end at high speed, crossed 100 meters of grass, and caught the landing gear in a drainage ditch. The jet skidded on its engine nacelles before stopping at the water's edge. The landing gear was destroyed. The engine mounts were damaged. Seawater soaked into the turbines. The Kika was finished. The second prototype was almost complete, but 4 days later Japan surrendered. All work stopped immediately. The jet age for Japan had lasted exactly 4 days. The consequences rippled outward from that moment in ways nobody could have predicted. American occupation forces arrived at Nakajima's Koizumi factory to find 19 Kika airframes in various stages of assembly. Some were nearly complete, missing only landing gear and final systems. Others existed only as joined fuselages and wings. 5 airframes had been sent to Kogasho for conversion to 2-seat trainers. All were confiscated. Records show that Units 2, 3, and 4 were crated and shipped to the United States for evaluation. They arrived at Naval Air Station Patuxent River in Maryland. American engineers examined them with intense interest. What could be learned from Japan's jet program? How close had they come to operational deployment? The answer was sobering, very close. Perhaps 2 months from initial combat operations. Perhaps 3 months from mass production reaching meaningful numbers. The strategic implications were analyzed thoroughly. If Japan had begun Kika development just 6 months earlier, if the submarines carrying German technology had arrived intact, if the war had continued another 6 months, the tactical situation might have changed significantly. Kika kamikaze attacks against American carriers would have been devastating. Jets are far harder to intercept than conventional aircraft. Their speed makes defensive fire solutions nearly impossible. A Kika carrying a 102-pound bomb, diving at over 400 miles per hour, would have challenged even the best American fighter cover. But the Kika designed for kamikaze missions never flew in anger. The fighter variant with twin 30mm cannons and an upgraded NE-20 Kai engine remained on paper. Plans projected a maximum speed of 448 miles per hour at 30,000 feet. Still insufficient to catch B-29s, but fast enough to be problematic. With proper tactics, Kika fighters might have forced American bombers to fly higher, carry fewer bombs, or require heavier fighter escorts. Any of these outcomes would have reduced the bombing campaign's effectiveness. Lieutenant Commander Susumu Takaoka survived the war. Born February 24, 1912, he went on to fly Japan's first post-war jet trainer, becoming the only pilot to fly both of Japan's earliest jet aircraft. He became a symbol of continuity between wartime desperation and post-war rebuilding. When Japan's self-defense force acquired jet trainers in the 1950s, Takaoka was there again, bridging eras. He carried the memory of those August days at Kisarazu throughout his life. Captain Tanegashima, the engine designer, reportedly wept when Takaoka completed the first flight. Those tears represented years of pioneering work under impossible conditions. After the war, Tanegashima's work influenced Japan's post-war aviation industry. The knowledge gained developing the NE-20 was not lost. Engineers who worked on that program went on to careers with companies that eventually built some of the world's finest jet engines. The other supporting characters faded into history. Engineers Kazuo Ono and Kenichi Matsumura, who designed the Kika in less than a year, returned to civilian life. Their names appear in technical histories but not in popular memory. The ground crews who prepared that August 7th flight scattered to different fates. Some died in the final weeks of war. Others rebuilt lives in occupied Japan. None lived to see the complete story of what they accomplished become widely known. One Kika survives today, displayed at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum's Udvar-Hazy Center, positioned beneath the Boeing B-29 Enola Gay. The juxtaposition is deliberate and profound. The aircraft that represented Japan's last desperate hope sits in the shadow of the aircraft that ended the war. Visitors who see it rarely understand what it represents. Most focus on the B-29, on the atomic bombs on the war's end. The small jet beneath it tells a different story, one about technological achievement under impossible circumstances, about what might have been if time had not run out. Historical assessments of the Kika have evolved considerably. Early post-war analyses dismissed it as a crude copy of German technology, a desperate imitation without real capability. Modern historians recognize something more complex. Yes, the Kika drew heavily on German research, but Japanese engineers took fragmentary information and created a working aircraft in extraordinary time. The NE-20 engine, developed from photographs and notes, actually ran, actually produced thrust. That alone represents a remarkable engineering achievement. Declassified documents reveal that American intelligence feared Japanese jet development more than public statements acknowledged. If the war had continued into 1946, if Operation Downfall, the invasion of Japan, had been necessary, Kika aircraft would have been a serious threat. They would have complicated American air superiority, forced changes to carrier operations, potentially increased American casualties. The atomic bombs ended the war before that possibility materialized. The Kika also influenced the early Cold War. American examination of Japanese jet technology fed into early U.S. Navy jet programs. Soviet forces in Manchuria captured significant Japanese aviation research, including jet-related work. That knowledge dispersed globally, contributing to the rapid spread of jet technology in the late 1940s. But perhaps the most important legacy is what the Kika represents about war, technology, and timing. The lesson echoes through history. Technology alone never wins wars. The side that can deploy technology first in sufficient numbers integrated into effective tactics wins. Germany developed the Me-262 first. Britain flew jet aircraft before Germany. The United States began jet programs before either, but only the Americans had time to develop jets into a post-war air force. Germany and Japan ran out of time. The Kika was good enough. Given another year, it could have been produced in thousands. Given better resources, it could have been developed into an effective interceptor. Given earlier priority, it might have changed the Pacific War's final months. But it received none of those things. It received 10 months of development, desperate improvisation, fragmented technology, and collapsing infrastructure. On that August afternoon, when Takaoka lifted the Kika into blue sky above Kisarazu Bay, Japan's best hope for technological salvation took flight. When the war ended 4 days later, that hope crashed into Tokyo Bay alongside the damaged second prototype, broken landing gear and all. The jet age came to Japan exactly 4 days too late to matter. The broader truth remains clear across all of military history. Wars are not won by the best technology. They are won by sufficient technology, deployed in time in numbers with tactics and strategy aligned. Japan created a jet aircraft that worked. But war is measured in what can be used, not what can be built. The Kika was Japan's forgotten jet, the aircraft that might have changed everything if only there had been time. But time, more than any technology, was the one resource Japan could not improvise or reverse engineer from photographs.